Welcome back to the HPP podcast. I'm Rich Harris, and thank you for joining us again. We took a week off to prepare for our college basketball preview show, which is today's show. And in our last episode, we discussed Hoops Prospects' fearless forecast for the 2022-23 NBA season. And we were joined on the show by show favorite Law Murray, who covers the Clippers for the Athletics. You can listen to that episode or any other HPP episode at hoopsprospects.com. You can also read about the fearless forecast. Maverick did a nice summary of the voting there. And also we had division previews for each NBA division. You can check that all out on hoopsprospects.com. Today, I am once again joined by Drew Barton and Maverick Swenson. Gentlemen, it's been 2 weeks since we were last together. How are you doing? Anything interesting happen since we were last on the show?
Nothing too crazy on my end. Just a lot of college football and a lot of basketball prep. So it's been a good couple weeks of sports.
That's true. Maverick?
Oh, I've been fantastic, Just a lot of great things are happening just with basketball and just life in general. I couldn't be happier.
And of course, I feel the same for our weekly F1 update. Since we missed 2 weeks, Max Verstappen won 2 F1 races. He won the U.S. Grand Prix and the Mexican Grand Prix, setting the record for most race wins in a season, and also setting the record for most points in a season. Max, once again, please don't be shy. Please come on the show. We can even do it in Dutch. Anyway, so before we dive into college basketball, which is going to be our focus today, let's get caught up on the biggest NBA news. The last time we met, the season was going to tip off in a day or two. So, gentlemen, we've been going for a couple of weeks now. Most teams have 6, 7, maybe 8 games under their belt. Obviously, there's 70-some to go for each team. Tell me your foremost thought right now on what has transpired so far in the NBA season. What's the first thing you think of, when you think about what's gone on so far?
I think that the worst part about this season isn't just the upside down nature of how a lot of the teams that we thought were going to be really good are struggling, and a lot of the teams that we thought were going to be really bad aren't. That should be the main talking point. And I'm just going to put this out there. I know it's been talked about, but it really sucks that Kyrie Irving and a lot of the drama, particularly around the Brooklyn Nets, has just come to such a forefront. Really upsetting. Like, I understand the notion of it's not just shut up and dribble, but at some point it's like it's not even about basketball anymore. And it's just really sad. We'll leave it at that. I could go on and on about that situation. It's been talked about a lot, but the basketball has been really interesting. My poor Warriors, man, dear God, I understand what Kerr's doing. I've been to a game this year, so I got to see them live. It's very obvious to me that Kerr is really trying to get these young guys to take on a bigger load. His rotations have been at least the games that I've watched have been very focused on that second unit getting a lot of playing time. The starters are all going to be out for this next game. So hopefully those young guys figure it out, man, because I've been very disappointed with Wiseman and Kuminga, not just with their play, but I don't think they've bought in. And I think I'm a little bit concerned that the high draft status has kind of gotten to the point where they're now being told something or feel a certain type of way that maybe they should have been the guys from the jump and they shouldn't have had to wait for their moment. And it just doesn't seem like they're giving the effort that they should. But there's enough talent on that team, and they've got an all-timer leading the way. So hopefully the Warriors turn it around.
Yeah. Steph is having another MVP-like season. Yep. Mav, what's the foremost thought that comes to your mind so far in this NBA season?
For our listeners, y'all already know where this is going. Luka Doncic is putting on another. He's on another level. I mean, his Eurobasket transferred so well, and he is not even shooting well from 3 yet, and he's still putting up 36.4 points per game. It cannot get any better than that. Also, Paulo Banchero is
the real deal.
doesn't even look like a rookie. I thought that he would be playing the 2 and the 3 with big lineups. I was right. But now he's starting to play the 1 even. I mean, it is watching him. It looks like he's been in the league for 5 years. I'm extremely impressed and very excited to see where his NBA career goes.
Yeah, I don't think, and we've been doing this since 2017, so I don't think I really have missed on the number 1 pick up until last year. And I think I wasn't really warm to Banchero until the end of the season. And I think the NCAA tournament really turned me around. And then when I went back and looked at game film of like the top 5 guys, I really started to believe that maybe he was the best prospect, but I had already gone on record multiple times saying Jabari Smith was, and I said he was the safest pick, and and I still think he's a superior defender to Banchero, but Banchero is better in that regard. He's a better passer than I first thought, and his offensive versatility is better than I thought. Yeah, but I can admit a mistake.
He's got an NBA body, and that goes a long way early on.
Yeah, but it's just amazing, his handle, it's just, and
hell of a player.
Yeah, excellent player, and definitely was the only rookie that is even coming remotely close to giving him a run right now for Rookie of the Year is Ben Mathurin, and
who we also talked about.
Yes,
we were all very high on him.
I would say when we talked in the Fearless Forecast, the 2 players we probably talked about the most, even though I don't believe Mathurin got a vote. I don't think anyone voted for him.
No,
but
he was my runner-up if we had a runner-up. But no one voted for him.
I think he would have been mine as well. So, all right. So, moving on to, we touched on this a little bit about things being upside down, and we have 2 lists here. And maybe we'll touch on these and come to a conclusion of who's the biggest. We have biggest disappointment and biggest surprise. And our biggest disappointment teams we have nominated are the Warriors, the Lakers, the Heat, the Clippers, the Sixers, and the Nets. Drew, do you want to take a run at this? I know you touched on your team, and I know the Warriors bench, actually the starters have been, outscoring their opponents. It's the bench that's been letting the team down. I personally am not concerned about your Warriors. I think,
Yeah, I mean, I think the Warriors will be fine because there is a part of me that thinks that if Kerr gets tired of screwing around and he's like, okay, I'm going to send a message, he can just roll out his kind of 6-man rotation of Draymond, Clay, Steph, Wiggins, and Poole, and Looney, and kind of remedy those issues. He's kind of forcing the young guys into these situations. I'm definitely, look, I'm not even going to say the Nets because they're just a freaking mess. And we all kind of saw this coming. I mean, at least here on the show, we've talked about over and over again how they're,
well, we kind of predicted this. We really should pat ourselves on the back because we've been saying, this was a disaster waiting to happen, and Kyrie couldn't make it 3-4 weeks.
Can't help himself. Yeah. So,
4 weeks.
That's the easy pick, the Nets. I think from the rest of the list, I guess for my sake, in terms of, up to this point, eating some crows, I had the Sixers winning the East, and they have not looked great. Now they're losing James Harden. Again, I think they'll settle in. I mean, their offensive ratings is 6th in the league, so the offense looks fine. I mean, Maxey is playing very well, at least offensively. Joel Embiid has had some good games. I mean, losing Harden does hurt. I do think as the season goes on, the defense will come around. I can't imagine a defense anchored by Joel Embiid with guys like PJ Tucker, out there as well, is going to sit in the mid-20s the rest of the season. So I think they're probably the most disappointing for me because I expected them to come out and consistently look like the best team in the East or one of them, and they haven't yet. But I think they'll be okay. It's so early in the season. I mean, injuries are going to pop up. Things are going to happen to teams, and, the tanking teams are going to eventually start tanking. So I think the Sixers are disappointing now, but we'll turn it around.
I guess maybe I'm going to reword the question to you, Maverick, in the sense of which of these teams, of these 6 teams, should we be the most worried about? I mean, we didn't predict. We thought the Lakers were right on the edge of making the playoffs. all these other teams we thought solidly were in the playoffs. So which of these teams, you can answer it both ways. So who do you consider the biggest disappointment, and who do you think in the long run might not really be able to turn it around?
Well, from the list, I would probably still say the Sixers. And here's why. I know that the Harden injury is extremely unfortunate, but Harden looked really good. He looked in shape. And he looked much more efficient, faster. Tyrese Maxey on another level of efficiency that carried over from the preseason. I think Joel Embiid is out of shape. I think that he hasn't looked good at all. I think that a lot of his defensive intensity has been lost. He's going to have to play himself back into shape. And that worries me because Joel Embiid is not the picture of health by any means necessary. So him coming in out of shape already, it's scary, especially for the long run. I had the Nets. I believe I had the Nets at the 4th seed. Right now, I think
that's where they landed in our fearless forecast as well, is the 4th.
I would probably say the Nets is second, but again, we called it on the podcast. We had them highly ranked because of their talent, but we were very cautious about the team and who was on the team. And now that Nash is gone, the Kyrie situation, even injuries, the Ben Simmons. I mean, we haven't even talked about Ben Simmons. He doesn't even look like he wants to be on the floor with some of the fouls that he's taking.
Someone said that he looked, I forget what writer, but some writers said that he looked relieved every time he sat down because he was in foul trouble. He looked relieved to not be on the floor. And
Ben Simmons, he has not looked good defensively.
No,
at all.
No, terrible. People have been blowing by him right and left. And if they're not blowing by him, they're out muscling him.
And it came to the point when Dallas played Brooklyn and they were searching for the switch with Ben Simmons. And Luka would kill him every time. There was one time when Ben Simmons fouled him and he got a random steal and he got happy about that. But the other 5 times, Luka had scored on him. I don't understand. I just don't understand, that he should have came in with a defensive mindset and everything else kind of come about throughout the season. That has not looked like the case at all.
Well, Hugh said on the show over the summer, that he just didn't think Ben Simmons liked playing basketball. And to me, that's, really seems to be the case. But I've seen average, not just Luka, I've seen average NBA players just blow right by him this year. And he still can't shoot. And he's really timid on the offensive end. And, he is leading the team in assists, but that's partly because he doesn't want to shoot the ball. But if he's not going to play defense, he's basically worthless.
Not basically.
He is. Yeah.
He is worthless.
Yeah.
He is worthless. He is a paycheck. You are wasting money. You are wasting time. Like I said, I don't want to beat up on the Nets and the Lakers. The Lakers have shown life, and they defend they play hard. It's not sustainable because those guys are older. Like their key players are older. They're not going to play with that intensity the whole season, and they're one injury away from. Matt Ryan misses that shot 99 more times if he takes it. So, good for him for having his NBA moment and his one shining moment. But, I'm not going to bank on that. But the Nets, I honestly hope the Nets don't win another game this year. That's not going to happen. But I'm at the point I'm so done with them. Blow it up. You had a good thing and just rebuild. Like you're wasting time. You're not winning with that.
The problem is they can't blow it up. No one wants Kyrie. Nobody wants Ben Simmons.
I'm letting Kyrie walk. I'll swallow the Ben Simmons deal, and I'm trading KD. And I'm trying to recuperate picks. I'm blowing it up. However you can.
Wait. I gotta add something. If they're gonna blow it up and try to tank, it's not like they have their picks. All of them went to James Harden.
That's what I'm saying. They got to recuperate. They got to start getting picks back now. Like those guys are getting older. You're clearly not going anywhere. You have no future assets. Get rid of it, blow it up, and just reload the bank as much as you can. KD, for a team will give up multiple picks for KD. You can get something for him, and you might be able to con somebody for, Ben Simmons, maybe, or, maybe someone's desperate enough to take Kyrie. We see it all the time. Talent trumps things. It happens. I'm just saying that the team's going nowhere. You got rid of your coach. I'm restarting. You're just not doing anything with that team.
My thing is, I advocated for Ben Simmons on the show. It was the first ever podcast I've ever done. And I said that Ben Simmons at the 5 is going to be a mismatch, and it's going to be dangerous in the playoffs because of his defensive versatility, and because if he's coming off a pick and roll, his ability to pass out of that is what's going to separate him. Just like Draymond Green, that's what I imagine for him. Right. He looks nothing like that.
Well, first of all, they've been playing him with Nick Claxton. So
yes.
So you can't. By the way, Claxton has been one of the few bright spots on the Nets this year.
It's a mismatch. He put it this way: Ben Simmons, it's a mismatch, all right, for him. He's getting cooked everywhere.
Again, I read today, some GM told, I don't remember the reporter's name, but some GM told him before the season, if you would ask me, I would have traded for Ben Simmons. But now, after watching him for 7 or 8 games, I don't want anything to do with him. So, none of us thought that Ben Simmons would be a defensive liability ever. Okay.
Yeah.
Now he's hurt again. I just don't know. We asked the question over the summer, who do we have, more faith in, or, Kyrie, who was more likely to implode, Kyrie or Ben? And I actually said, I thought Ben was. And actually Kyrie, when he's on the court, even though he does do all the ISO crap and take some pretty, crazy shots, and he's not the best defender, he's still actually performing at a good level. But Simmons just doesn't look like a professional basketball player.
It's all right, Rich. The answer to that question was both of them.
Yeah.
So you were right and wrong at the same time, because the answer was both.
And then they want to hire Udoka as the head coach. What are you doing? This team has already hit unprecedented levels. In my opinion, I don't ever think I can't remember a bigger disaster. And now they want to hire a coach who got fired for inappropriate conduct?
Of course they do.
2 months ago, by the way. 2 months ago.
Yeah, right. It's not like right, exactly. So, first of all, the team I'm most concerned about, I believe, is a tie. And it's for the 2 teams I thought would meet for the NBA championship, the Sixers and the Clippers. The Clippers I'm worried about mainly because I don't, Kawhi is not looking healthy. And he's not playing now again. They tried limiting his minutes, but now his knee's bothering again. And when he's played, he hasn't been too impressive. You take him out of the equation, and I don't know if the Clippers, I don't see the Clippers winning the West. I already thought it was going to be close with him. And so you take him out, and if he's nothing like the, Kawhi that we're used to, then I think the Clippers are in trouble. I will say, though, game 1 of the season, watching the Sixers play Boston, I couldn't get over how old and slow the Sixers looked. And I said to you guys in the group chat, I said exactly that. And I also, I started watching the teams who were doing well and the teams who weren't. And one thing that seemed to be, to me, to be, obvious was it seemed like the teams who wanted to get up and down the floor were winning, and the teams who didn't play so much ISO ball were winning. And with the Sixers, you got 2 ISO guys in Embiid and Harden. And when those 2 have the ball, the Sixers the rest of the Sixers don't cut. They just stand around watching, and they take it all the way down to the end of the shot clock, and then they end up taking these crazy-ass shots. Now, I've watched the Sixers more than any other team out there, and I did notice, and in that first two games of the season, Embiid looked disinterested. He looked out of shape. He was not playing good defense at all, and it wasn't all just because he was out of shape. It was just like, where is your head at? And I was like, what is wrong with him? I mean, he got booed in Philadelphia. He got booed. I mean, the city of Philadelphia has loved him forever, but that second game of the season, he was booed. And I was booing him. And when they put him back in the game in the fourth quarter, the Sixers bench had actually, or whoever they had in there, it may have been George Niang or whatever, they had actually retaken the lead or at least closed the gap. And when Embiid came back, poof, game fell apart again. And I just don't think you can have two guys just standing around playing iso ball while the rest of the team just stands around and waits. So anyway, this motivated me to do a little study this week. And so on Wednesday, so it doesn't include yesterday's two games, okay? And I looked at teams in terms of what they're doing the most. It wasn't so much at what they're doing successfully, it's what they do the most. And you could actually separate the league into three tiers. You know, the teams that are winning, clearly winning, the teams that are kind of around 500, and then the teams that are clearly below 500. And what I found was the teams that like to run, the teams that don't shoot so many jumpers, and the teams that play less ISO were the teams that are winning. And the Sixers are a prime example of this. They rank next to last in transition percentage, meaning they run the next last team in the league. They rank 27th for transition, or no, wait, excuse me. They rank last in transition percentage. They rank 29th for transition points, and they rank 27th in transition defense, meaning they're not running the floor the other way. And they rank second in the league in ISO percentage, meaning they run ISO plays the second most percentage-wise than any other team in the league. And but that pattern, clearly, those types of teams are clearly losing. And I think what you're going to find is teams are going to start saying, hey, we can't have a bunch of 30-year-old guys on the team anymore. We need some speed. We need to get up and down the floor. And Toronto, I think, is a prime example of one of these teams that actually that's the way the NBA is going to go. What Toronto is doing is the way I think everybody's going to go eventually. They pass, they run the floor, they play tough defense, everybody's switchable. I think that's the way this league is going. One other note about speed, because we've been hearing a lot about Russell Westbrook, is no longer Russell Westbrook, blah, blah, blah. And I'll tell you one thing, from covering sports since the 90s, guys who rely on speed, they reach a point in their career and they fall off a cliff. So guys like Tom Brady last forever, or guys who rely more on technique or strength or things that you don't lose over time or intelligence, they will last forever. But guys like Randy Moss, guys like Allen Iverson, guys like Russell Westbrook, when they hit the wall, they just fall off a cliff because they rely too much on speed. And when that speed's gone, they don't have anything to fall back on. So there you go. All right. So let's turn the tables and talk about the biggest surprises. And boy, are there some. Listen to this list. The Jazz, the Spurs, the Trailblazers, the Milwaukee Bucks, and we only say that because they're 7-0 and pretty banged up, or at least somewhat banged up. The Suns, again, they've been a little banged up, and we expected them to take somewhat of a fall this year. We still expected them to make the playoffs, but we didn't expect them to be one of the top teams in the league. And the Cavaliers, although I guess what I find surprising personally about the Cavaliers is just that they're doing so well so quickly. I think we knew they were going to be a good team. So again, of these teams, I mean, we know the Bucks are for real. I think we know the Cavaliers for real. Can the Jazz, Spurs, Blazers maintain this? And can any of those teams maintain it? And will the Suns maintain they're kind of playing at the same kind of level they played last year? So
yeah, I mean, for the sake of, we got a lot of college basketball to cover, I'll put it this way. Bucks, I'm not surprised because Giannis is generationally great. We're looking at a guy who's ascending towards the top 15. He's going to carry that load. So 7-0, surprising. Them still being very good, not really. Cavs, I think, like Rich, you said, just such a great collection of talent. I'm just, I thought they'd be more of an all-star break team, like find their footing and then from the all-star break really take off. So good on them for getting it figured out. Suns, I think we were more all on the mindset of like, is the mentality going to be there? The talent, they still are talented. So, we're seeing the talent kind of, win out right now. Will that maintain?
We also said Mikal Bridges was going to have to take a step up, and he seems to have. And Chris Paul seems to be declining, right in front of our eyes. So
I could see this being a situation where they have a really solid regular season, but I think in the playoffs, especially if Chris Paul is on fumes at that point, I can't see them going far. He's such an important catalyst to them. Blazers, I haven't really seen them play, so I won't speak on them, but I'm looking at their offensive defensive rating. I mean, generally speaking, you want to be in the top 10 for both. That's how you mark a true contender, and they're right there. So do I think that this is a championship level team? Probably not. But, again, there's a solid collection of talent, and Dame is back. It's all about the Jazz and Spurs right now for shocking. I mean, I think, Rich, I'll give you credit. You were right about the Jazz, that there's a lot of talent on that team, like cast off talent. I think the thing that'll be interesting is, are they able to maintain this pace? Because a lot of these guys have never really carried the mantle of like being the best player on a team. So can they maintain as teams adjust, as fatigue kicks in? But you have to give them credit. I mean, I expected that team to be pretty bad. But I think the most surprising team has to be the Spurs. First and foremost, they just cut Josh Primo, which I see on our notes. So they got rid of a lottery level talent that they invested in, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
And I mean, you go down that list, and at least with the Jazz, you're like, there's a lot of cast-offs who maybe at some point scored 20 points per game like a Colin Sexton, or were a lottery pick like a Lauri Markkanen. But you look at the Spurs, and you're like, okay, they got Keldon Johnson, who's kind of just been a third option at best, and Jakob Poeltl, who's like a good classic throwback big who will rebound and give you a 13-point, 10 rebound game pretty consistently. There's nothing else on that roster that sparks any level of confidence, and here they are. So hats off to Pop, man. Their offensive and defensive rating aren't great, and they're not a great team, but they've actually been
outscored on the season.
Yeah, but they've looked a lot. They looked better than I thought they would.
Well,
than I thought they would.
They play basketball the right way. They move the ball. They don't take bad shots if they can. So that's a lot to do with coaching.
Exactly.
Maverick?
Well, I think that Will Hardy deserves a lot of credit. The Jazz head coach. I mean, he's been able to put every player in the right position early on, especially Lauri Markkanen, just able to unlock his game finally. I mean, he was playing the 3 in Cleveland. He was overshadowed by the plethora of bigs in Chicago when he was there. He's been finally unlocked. Do I think it's sustainable? Absolutely not. But it's great to watch now, which is important. The Spurs, I thought that Keldon Johnson would take a big step up, but I thought his efficiency would drop off a little bit. It is not. He looks fantastic. I mean, he's going to be a solid scorer on a championship contender eventually in his career. I don't know if it's going to be with the Spurs, but eventually he has a lot of offensive talent, and he still is pretty versatile on defense.
Mm-hmm.
But I want to talk about the Cavs. I was a big believer in the Cavs before the season started. I will note this. Darius Garland has been injured basically the entire regular season so far, and I think that's the reason why they're doing so well. Donovan Mitchell is so used to leading an offense that there's been no real adjustment. The adjustment that y'all are talking about will start now, because now Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell need to learn how to coexist.
Right.
You also still have Karis LeVert, Kevin Love, Evan Mobley, and Jarrett Allen. That is going to be the adjustment. The adjustment has not started. I think that's why they've been so good. Now, their defensive rating, maintaining such a high level, because I believe last year they were 5th.
And they were definitely top 5.
That is incredible. I mean, and especially with, Karis LeVert playing big minutes, Kevin Love playing big minutes, and you're relying on Evan Mobley, who was injured in the preseason, by the way, and Jarrett Allen. They're a really good team, and that's really scary going to come playoff time, because you're not going to be able to match up with them if they're that big, especially if Mobley's playing the 5. It's just such a well-rounded team.
Yeah, Mitchell's been playing out of his mind, and probably could be in the MVP consideration right now. By the way, we won't see them together tonight. They're both out. I disagree with you about the Jazz. I think the Jazz have a chance to sneak into the play-in. It all depends if they want to or not. I think they have the talent. I think they have the coaching. I think they have the system. One of the things I watched the other day when I was watching them, they had Olynyk in one corner, and they had Markkanen in the other corner, and I don't even know who it was, Conley or Sexton or whatever. This attacking the rim, and it just spread the court so perfectly. And I'm like, how many teams can do that? Put one 7-footer in one corner and another 7-footer in another corner, open up the lane like that. I'm a believer in the Jazz, and I really think they should keep that. The only thing, is in terms of the trade, I would consider trading Beasley or Clarkson. I know they really like Clarkson, and he seems to really like it there. So if he doesn't want to go, I wouldn't force it. But maybe Beasley, maybe because right now with Beasley getting minutes, Abaji's not.
Yeah.
And so I would like to see Abaji start to get some playing time.
Absolutely.
The Spurs, I think, are going to fall hard. They just lost Blake Wesley. He was going to be the de facto backup point guard after they got rid of Primo, and Wesley's his first chance he had to do that, he got hurt, and now he's out till December at some point at the earliest. They really don't have a backup point guard, and so I think the Spurs will definitely fall hard no matter how well they play. So a couple more things, and we touched on this multiple times, is the Primo incident, and also the Miles Bridges thing was finally resolved. And I'll just state this right here about Miles Bridges. And I don't know if you guys have any comments, because there's really no clarification on his status. And the Hornets basically said, we're not going to comment on this, or we're not going to take any action until the legal stuff is done. Well, the legal stuff is done. And what that was is Bridges, I'm not going to go into details. To me, I'm really surprised he didn't get jail time for the way it has been described. But he gets a 3-year probation and a lot of other stuff that goes along with that. And of course, the Hornets still hold his rights, but he remains unsigned, restricted free agent. So I don't know if they're going to cut him or maybe just sign him to the qualifying offer, which would keep him for 1 year, and then he'd be unrestricted next year. Any comments on that situation? No? Okay.
No.
Okay, cool. Yeah, we really don't know anything new except that that's been resolved. He won't go to jail. But I really have to read I kind of got a kick out of Josh Primo's lawyer's response to the lawsuit today. So if you're not familiar, So basically, a former employee of the Spurs is suing the team and Josh Primo, and she alleges that he exposed himself to her on 9 separate occasions. She's a psychologist, she's a doctor, and but who worked for the team. And he apparently exposed himself 9 different times and to other employees. He's also been accused by not just one female, it's more than one. But the quote of the day has to come from Primo's attorney. Now, keep in mind, when the Spurs cut Primo, he basically put out a statement admitting that he was guilty and admitting that he needed help. Okay, without going into specifics. But that's basically, if you read it, he's basically saying, okay, I messed up. I need help. I'm going to get help. I'll be back, And this is why. So his attorney, meanwhile, I got to get this guy's name right, William J. Briggs, because he must be, your typical douchebag attorney. So he basically called this woman a liar, and he says, Josh Primo never intentionally exposed himself to her or anyone else and was not even aware that his private parts were visible outside of his workout shorts. I can't read that without laughing each time. He's claiming that Josh Primo wears shorts that are apparently undersized, and he's not aware of what is hanging out of his shorts. And he wears them consistently, and people see his junk, but he's not aware of this. It was totally unintentional.
Nah, honestly, screw Josh Primo. There's no way anyone's dumb enough to believe that. If Primo's a creep like that, then he's a creep like that, because you're going to tell me that you run around and you practice and you play with no spandex, nothing on, and then you go to the it doesn't make any sense.
I know, but what's worse is his statement.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, dude, it just sucks because we're coming out of the whole Deshaun Watson situation in the NFL, right? And something like this happens, and you're just like, dude, I don't know. It's important that stuff like this is brought to the forefront, but don't give a garbage response like that. Right. I would rather
it wasn't. Keep in mind, Primo didn't say this. His douchebag
no, I know,
attorney did,
but the lawyer did. But Primo signed off on that. Right. There's no way the lawyer was just like, hey, watch this. I got a good one for the people, Josh. I'm going to take care.
Now, keep in mind, Josh Primo is 19 years old. He has no idea how much over his head is. And this attorney is probably going to try to drag this out and drain as much money as he can from Josh Primo, okay, instead of making him do the right thing,
Yeah.
So I would just love to see William J. Briggs officially our douchebag attorney of the week. I wonder if he worked in the 80s, 70s, and 80s where they wore the real short shorts. And
wow.
So, William J. Briggs, you are officially a creep. So moving on. So I just had that quote. It's like a gift that doesn't stop giving. So we're going to move on to college hoops. That's going to be our focus today. But of course, we couldn't ignore the NBA because the NBA has just been just more Game of Zone stuff. So what we're going to do is I'm going to read off our top 25 teams, which was selected by me. We didn't have a voting process. I just analyzed all the teams, and this is the way I ranked them. And so I also read off where they ranked in the coaches poll and the AP poll. We have North Carolina 1, which is same with AP and the coaches. Gonzaga 2, same with the other 2 polls. We have Kentucky 3. Kentucky was 4 in both the other polls. By the way, the other polls were so close to being identical, it was scary. We have Tennessee at 4. Both polls had them at 11. We have Texas at 5. Both polls had them at 12. We have Houston at 6. Both polls had them at 3. We have UCLA at 7. AP had them 8. Coaches had them 7. We have Creighton at 8. Both polls had them at 9. We have Arkansas at 9. Both polls had them at 10. We have Duke at 10. AP had them 7. Coaches 8. Kansas 11. Both polls had them at 5. Baylor at 12. Both polls had them at 6. Auburn 13. Both polls had Auburn at 15. Alabama 14. AP had them at 20. Coaches at 19. Villanova 15. And AP had them at 16. Coaches at 17. Arizona at 16. AP had them at 17. Coaches had them at 13. So that was one of the few times they had a discrepancy. Excuse me. Indiana at 17. Both polls were a little higher on them. They had them at AP had them at 13, coaches at 14. We have Illinois at 18. Both polls had them at 23. We have Virginia at 19. Both polls had them at 18. We have Xavier at 20. Now, what I did was, and when the coaches in AP vote, they only list the top 25, but they also say who got the most votes. So I basically just carried off the rankings as far as I could. So based on the points, Xavier in the AP would have finished 33, and then the coaches 44. So we're really high on Xavier compared to where they are. We have Michigan at 21. Both polls had Michigan at 22. We have Miami of Florida at 22. Both polls had them at 28. We have Texas Tech at 23. AP had them at 25. Coaches 24. We have Dayton at 24. AP had them at 24. Coaches had them at 25. And lastly, we had Florida at 25. Again, Florida wasn't in the either poll, but based on the points of the voting, they would have finished 38th in the AP and 41 in the coaches poll. So the teams that didn't make our top 25, but were in both polls, were TCU. AP had them 14 and 16. We have them at 27. Oregon, I have at 30. We have them at 30. Both polls had them at 21. And lastly, San Diego State, we have at 39. The AP had them at 19, and the coaches had them at 20. So that's the summary of our voting. So before we continue and go into, we're going to break down each team. We want to bring on our special guest, Mathew Postins, who covers the Big 12 for Heartland College Sports. Today's guest is Mathew Postins, who covers the Big 12 for Heartland College Sports. Mathew is an award-winning sports journalist who's written for Sports Illustrated and Fan Nation, among others. Mathew, thank you for joining us so much today. We really appreciate it. How are you doing?
I'm good. We got some storms rolling through the area, so if I suddenly drop off,
why. Oh no!
We need the rain down here in Texas, I'll tell you. But
okay.
It's severe weather all day down here.
Right. So I noticed when I ran across your work on Heartland, and doing some research for the preseason, and so I noticed when doing some more research into your background, you are just like about everything Texas, baseball, football, basketball.
Yep, I've been covering the Texas Rangers for Inside the Rangers, which is part of the Fan Nation network, for about the last 6 months. I do some work for Fan Nation for Texas, Baylor, Texas Tech, Texas A&M, and a couple of other sites. And
did you go to Stephen F. Austin, by the way?
I did go to Stephen F. Austin, right. Yes.
So you're Texas through and through. Mm-hmm. And Maverick is a student, a senior at Texas A&M. He's our intern for this semester. So, I'm surrounded by Texans. This poor old Philly guy. And what a week for Philly and Texas. We got football, baseball, everything.
What a crazy week.
Yeah. All right, so let's get started by, I'm going to read off our preseason rankings, which actually aren't published. They're going to be published on the site tomorrow. But along with the show. But we have Texas at number 5, Kansas at number 11, Baylor at 12, Texas Tech at 23, TCU at 27. We have Iowa State just outside our top 40 at 41, and OK State at 46. And I should also mention, since we're talking Texas here, we have Houston at number 6 and A&M at 34. So I was just curious what you thought about our rankings. I know they don't match up with the AP or the coaches, which were almost identical this year.
Yeah.
So is there anything you vehemently disagree with? Or I think we're the only, the polls don't have Texas that high. I know that for sure.
I think the interesting part about Texas this year is that, when Chris Beard was at Media Day last month, he kind of described Texas as a 7+7 team. He's got 7 experienced players. He's got 7 relatively inexperienced players. Now, I think that team has a high ceiling like it had last year. The big problem they had last year was they just could not put all the pieces together. They'd have a couple games where they played really well, and it looked like, hey, they're finally getting their win. They're finally getting consistent, and then they never could quite put the chemistry together. And I thought the biggest problem they had last year was they just had too many mouths to feed in the backcourt.
Right.
You had Marcus Carr, you had Devin Askew transfer in, but you had talented holdovers in Andrew Jones, Courtney Ramey, Jace Febres, who was honestly criminally underused as a 3-point shooter by them last year.
Right.
Well, now all 3 of the holdovers are gone. Askew's transferred out. Tyrese Hunter's transferred in. And I think that's going to allow Marcus Carr to be a little bit more of the offensive player he was at his previous stop. Because I think you've got Carr who can handle the point, but I really feel like he's more of an off guard.
Yeah, he's definitely a score first guy. Yeah.
So I think that's going to help them from a chemistry standpoint. And I know Chris Beard's very high on both of his freshmen. He likes the defensive mindedness of Dylan Mitchell. Timmy Allen comes back with a lot of experience. Christian Bishop and Dylan Dessou are both healthy. So, there's a lot of potential there. I could see them being a top 10 team by the end of the season, but it really boils down to whether or not the chemistry experiment this year works a little bit better than it did last year. They just never could quite get the ingredients right the whole way through that last season.
Right. And we talked about it on the show during last year because I was very high on Texas last year. But I'm learning slowly that you can't, sometimes the sum is greater than the parts, and sometimes the parts don't always mesh together. Yeah. And I think you had all these guys, that were so used to being the man at their school. And now you're asking, even Bishop, okay, maybe he wasn't the man at Creighton, but he still was a far more prominent part of their offense. And so you ask all these guys, to defer to who? I don't know, because as you said, there were a lot of great holdovers. And it just, the chemistry wasn't there.
It wasn't quite there, but I think, this will be a little bit more of the type of team that Chris Beard likes to coach. And I think the fact that there's a little more room in the backcourt, I think that's going to help them, because I think part of their problem was just trying to find playing time for all 5 of those guys. I mean, Jace Febres ended up being the odd guy out, and he was arguably their best 3-point shooter from the perimeter. And he just didn't play enough till the end of the season where they really weren't able to mix him in enough for it to make much of a difference.
Right. And the kid from Iowa State, I'm going to
Tyrese Hunter. Yeah.
Tyrese Hunter. And I should know him. We have him really high on our draft board. And I noticed I read an article, I don't remember where, but I do know who wrote it because he's been on the show. It was John Fanta. Now, John is mainly a Big East guy, at least was, but I guess Fox has him doing some different stuff. But he said in the article, and I vehemently disagreed with this, he said that Tyrese Hunter wasn't a pro prospect. And we have him as a first round guy. I was curious your opinion on that.
I think he could eventually be a pro prospect. I'm not necessarily sure if it's after this season. The NBA draft is such a tricky thing, especially when you're a sophomore, junior.
Right.
I think he's a quality point guard. I think he needs to improve his shooting just a little bit. Not a ton, just a little bit. He wasn't a big 3-point shooter last year. I think he needs to extend his range a little bit. I think he's going to improve defensively this year with Chris Beard and that staff. I think the big thing for him is just to show a little bit more assertiveness offensively, which he started showing toward the end of last year, and to extend that range of his 3-point shot. And it's largely the feedback that Ochai Agbaji got from the NBA scouts after his junior year. And you saw what happened to him. He went from being a borderline second round pick in 2021 to a first round pick in 2022. So
lottery pick.
Yeah, lottery pick, in fact. So that's those are the things that I think Tyrese needs to work on this coming year. And if he has a big year, the NBA could be an option for him. But I still see a longer development tail for him next couple of years.
Right. And I think he's obviously a very gifted and floor general. And as you said, his shot wasn't there last year, but in the tournament, he started to turn it on.
He did.
And so that's what, really got me excited about him. All right. I'm going to shut up and pass you over to Maverick for another question.
Hey, Matthew, I just want to say thank you again for joining us.
Yeah, no problem.
My question relates back to Texas. I know you talked about it a little bit, but I think it's pretty safe to say that Texas struggled offensively last year. Do you think the team will be more efficient this season? And if so, why?
One of the things that Texas has really struggled with, not just last year, but really the last 3 or 4 years, it's been their efficiency from the 3-point line. They've never been a particularly good 3-point shooting team, even with Shaka as the head coach. I think it's something that's kind of hindered them from taking that step from being a team that makes the tournament to a team that maybe gets into the Sweet 16 when you get into the NCAA tournament. I think for them, part of it is getting better from the 3-point line. I also think they've got to convert a little bit better when it comes to the offensive glass. I think Timmy Allen was an upgrade over that, the last couple of years previously in terms of converting offensive rebounds into points. But I think with him, Bishop, Dessou, I think the three of them, they showed the ability to do that in spurts last year. I think if they can improve their 3-point shooting and improve their ability to score off second chance points, I think that's going to go a long way toward helping them improve their efficiency on the offensive end. Because in this conference, with as many guards as you have on the floor at one time, as much shooting from the outside as takes place, you've got a lot of opportunities to grab offensive rebounds and get second chance points. And that's an area that Texas wasn't quite as efficient at last year as they could have been.
I recently, I didn't see it, but I think it was in Ontario. Ontario, is that how you say it? Ontario Morris?
Oh, Arterio Morris. Yeah.
Okay. Scored, I believe 19 points. Now, I know Texas blew Arkansas out and Arkansas had a ton of turnovers, but my question, I think he was like 4 for 4 or 3 for 4 from 3-point line is, from what I see, he looks like a pretty dynamic shooter. Do you think he's going to be the team's best 3-point shooter?
It's possible. They needed infusion on that arc, certainly. And if that's what he's going to be consistently for them, that certainly boosts them from an offensive standpoint. I see them as a 9 or 10 deep team. I think Mitchell and Morris are both going to play a lot early on while Chris Beard tries to figure out the rotation. They're freshmen, so you're going to get natural ebbs and flows in their play. But I think that's a good first sign that Morris can give them something from the 3-point line that, really none of their guards were able to quite give them consistently last year.
Okay. My next question is going to be on TCU, and obviously we're not as high on them as the pollsters, and specifically I'm concerned about their depth, especially in the front court. But also there was some question about Damian Ball's eligibility. Has that issue been cleared up? And what do you think about the Horned Frogs' depth? Are they deserving? Because I think the polls have them in the teens, and we, like I said, we don't have them in our top 25, just outside.
Mm-hmm. As far as Ball goes, they are still working on that. Jamie Dixon actually talked about that earlier this week. He signed very briefly with a certified agent, which sort of screws up your draft process a little bit. You can go through the whole draft process if you don't sign with an agent, and you can come back. So they're trying to work out, his eligibility. I think he might miss a few games, but I think they're going to get it hopefully worked out pretty shortly. As for the team as a whole, it's funny, I saw Jamie Dixon at Media Day, and I referenced a quote that he made after they lost in the first round in 2021 of the Big 12 tournament. I said, you basically said there's no team building anymore, or no program building anymore. It's just team building. It's just new teams year to year. And at that particular point in time, basically his entire program transferred away. He hung on to Mike Miles, he hung on to Eddie Lampkin, and I think that was about it. And they brought in a whole new group of guys. And then, of course, they made the tournament last year, won their first round game, nearly beat Arizona in regulation before going to overtime. And now he has basically that entire team back. They're a little thin in the front court, but Jamie's really high on the progress that Eddie Lampkin's made. He was talking about how overweight he was during COVID.
Right.
I mean, when you say somebody loses weight, Jamie said, "Well, you kind of exaggerate a little bit." He said, "No, Eddie lost 75 pounds straight up after COVID."
And that's another thing I was worried about is he was at least carrying way too much weight.
Yeah, I mean, he's down to, I think he's down to where they want him to be now from a weight standpoint. So, they're a little thin in the front court, but everywhere else they've got so much depth. And in this conference, honestly, so many teams play 4 guards or 4, swingmen, whatever you want to call it.
Right.
That I'm not too worried about their front court depth, unless, of course, obviously he gets hurt.
Right.
The bigger thing I'm worried about is just, expectations. They haven't had a team like this before. They haven't had a team ranked this high in the AP top 25 before to go into a season. There have never been this kind of expectations around TCU ever, not even when Jamie was a player back in the 80s. Right. And one player to watch, they got to work a lot of different guys in. They're kind of like Texas last year in the regard that they just have so much talent and they're trying to figure out how to work it all in. Shahida Wells, who played at UTA, redshirted last year because he got hurt. He had, I think, 17 or 18 in their exhibition game last week. And he's a guy that, when I asked Jamie about him, Jamie looked at me like, "Yeah, I know something you don't know." So I think they're extremely talented. I think the expectations are going to be key as to how far they get in the Big 12 and how far they get in the NCAA tournament. Can they manage all that? Can they handle that kind of pressure and that kind of scrutiny? Because they're going to get it in this conference.
Right. Maverick?
So once again, Baylor appears to have one of the best groups of guards in the country. But at the same time, the Bears look pretty thin in the front court with injury to Jonathan Tchatchoua. Would you agree with that? And how much damage can this squad do without Everyday John?
Well, I mean, I think they knew they were going to have a depth problem up front going into the season after his injury. They addressed some of that in the transfer portal, actually, by bringing in Jalen Bridges, who was at West Virginia last year, and by bringing in Caleb Lohner, who was at BYU last year. In fact, I think Lohner averaged, if not a double-double, very close to it for the Cougars last year. So they've addressed some of that. Scott Drew is really high on the continued progress of Flo Thamba, who's their starting center, who finally kind of came on offensively a little bit at the end of last year. He finally had an opportunity. That really wasn't his role. It was defense, rebounding, that kind of thing. And once he finally got an opportunity to play, 20, 25 minutes a game, he started to show that he had a little bit more from an offensive standpoint. So between those 3 guys and, in addition to what they're developing on their roster, I think they have a little bit more depth than it looks like on paper. I'm interested to see how it fits together once they start playing regular season games. I think Thamba's going to start. But is he going to go with a 4-guard alignment, such as a Flagler, Keontae George, L.J. Cryer,
and Love,
and another guard,
Love,
and Love, Langston Love, or is he going to use Lohner and Thamba in the starting lineup and maybe bring Love off the bench? That's the thing I'm interested in, is how often is he going to go 4-guard? How often is he going to go 3-guard? And that may end up being dictated by who he's playing on that particular night. But I think they have a little more depth. And I think that was the one thing they were thinking about when they went into the transfer portal. And Baylor doesn't dip into the portal very often.
Right.
But I think that was the one thing on their mind with Everyday John being hurt and potentially not coming back till, maybe February of this year. Right. They needed to address that depth. And I think they got a couple of guys that could potentially help them there behind Thamba.
Okay. Would you say that Baylor has the potential to have the best group of guards in the country once again?
Yeah, I would. I mean, Keontae George is going to play right away. I mean, he's not going to sit on the bench. Flagler is healthy now. Cryer's healthy now. Both of those guys can shoot better than 40% from the 3-point line. You've got Love. They'll find a way to use him. They've got a good set of 4 guards. They're going to stick playing man defense. I asked Scott Drew that specifically at Media Day. I was wondering if maybe the personnel had changed enough for him to go back to that modified Tarkanian 1-3-1 half-court press they play, but said, nope, we're pretty much going to stick with the man D. So he feels pretty comfortable with the guards that he has, and I think it could be another great group for them. They're really built around their guard play. They're really built around those guys being two-way players. Flagler's going to run point. He's really excited about that. He hasn't had to run it much. I think he ran it one game last year when Akinjo was hurt against West Virginia. He ran the point that game. He's going to run the point more this year. He's really looking forward to that.
That should be interesting. In the polls, moving on to Kansas, the Jayhawks seem to be getting a lot of respect, based on reputation, and of course that's deserved. I mean, they've earned that. But this particular team, to me, in my opinion, seems to lack the usual athleticism of a typical KU team. Would you agree with that? Or do you see youngsters like MJ Rice and KJ Adams, who are athletic, but right now probably don't project as starters, emerging and bolstering this club's athleticism?
Boy, they're a really interesting team, because you go back to 2008 when they won the national championship. That team lost, I think, 8 players from that team. And the following team was actually briefly unranked in December before I think they lost in the second round of the NCAA tournament that year. This team is somewhat similar in that they lost a lot of talent from last year, a lot of experienced talent. So they've gone from being a very old team to a very young team. They've got 2 returning starters in Jalen Wilson and DeJuan Harris. You got Kevin McCullough coming in, who's gonna start for them. And then it's just this assemblage of young talent that Bill Self has brought in the last couple of years that you don't really know what you've got yet. I know they played their exhibition game the other night. I know Grady Dick had a really good game for them. There's some talk about them going small at times, maybe with KJ Adams as the 5. I think the interesting thing about this team is they don't really have a true post. Zach Clements is probably about as close as they have. There's also Cam Martin, who transferred in from Missouri Western last year, redshirted, was the Division II Player of the Year. He's got one more year, so he might fit into that rotation somewhere. But they don't have the true post like a David McCormick or an Udoka Azubuike like they have in years past. So they're going to be different. And I think the athleticism question is an interesting one, because I think they have some pieces that are really athletic, but they also have some pieces that I wouldn't classify in that way. And how well can you blend those two aspects together and build a team that can be competitive in this conference night tonight is going to be a really interesting question.
Okay. Maverick?
So Texas Tech's Mark Adams appears to be one of those coaches who just seems to always overachieve with his team. Here at Hoops Prospects, we are pretty high on Daniel Bacho, and we think he can hold down the fort while Fardas Amac is out. Mm-hmm. So here's a couple of questions about Tech. Okay, what do you think of Bacho? When will we see Amac? Mm-hmm. And do you think the team's pair of young wings, Elijah Fisher and Jalen Tyson, will have a big impact this season?
Well, with Daniel, I asked Adams that question too, and he loves him. He loves the progress that he's made from last year to this year. Now, last year's team was completely different. It was a lot of interchangeable parts, guys who were very similarly sized, which helped them defensively because they could switch off picks pretty easily because they were all really good defenders. But they're going to be a more traditional team in that they've got guards that are in that 6'2", 6'3" mold, and you've got players like Daniel who are in that 6'11" mold, along with Amac. Adams feels pretty confident that he can hold down the fort and even flourish while Amac is getting healthy from his foot injury. Adams said yesterday that they expect him to miss the next 6 weeks, which lines up with what he said at Media Day, which was that they expect and hope that he'll be ready for Big 12 play at the end of December. Whether or not that's actually feasible or not, I don't know. Jeff Goodman reported the other day that somebody, a source of his, said that Amac would be out till February. So it's a foot injury. I still am not totally clear what the foot injury is. I just know that I saw him in a cast elevated at Media Day in Kansas City in October. So we'll just have to kind of wait and see. But that's their timetable at Tech. They're hoping he'll be back by the end of Big 12 play. As for Fisher and Tyson, I think they present a couple of unique pieces to this team because they're those kinds of players that could run the floor, shoot outside, cut to the basket. They can defend threes and fours. They give them a lot of versatility, the kind of versatility that Kevin Obanor gives them, but they're a little bit quicker. They can get outside a little bit faster. They can keep up with players on the wing defensively. I think both of them could have an impact this year, but I know that they're really excited about the team's improvement in the three-point shooting category, just with the guards that they've transferred in, guys that have a history of shooting the three well. It was something they did not do well last year. Adams kind of agreed with me when I asked him that question. And they think that with Daniel inside, playing more of that traditional five and with some better three-point shooting, they think they could be a different but better team than they were a year ago.
Do you think Daniel can ultimately stretch the floor? He just seems to, I haven't seen him shoot a lot, but to me, it just appears that I can see him, eventually developing into that. I mean, I love his footwork, inside and the moves he has. He's just really developed that way. But, I think to be a complete player, to be an All-American type player, he's going to have to make some shots. So what do you think about that part of his game?
Yeah, I know they've been working to stretch him out a little bit this summer. It's interesting. Summer's all about individual work, and I think that was on their checklist to stretch him out to 8, 10, maybe 12 feet, where he can hit a consistent jumper and make it harder for defenders to just double team him down low. That's the kind of thing you want to avoid these days. Open spacing in basketball, playing 5 out. Your fives really have to be able to hit something 8, 10 feet away. And I know they've been working on it. I've seen practice footage of him working on it, but we haven't seen him do it in the game yet. So I'm looking forward to that next week when they start the season. I think the proof will be in the first several games of this season when we see how much he tries to take that shot, whether he can hit it consistently, and whether he just seems more comfortable closer to the basket.
Right. One of the teams in the conference that we don't expect a lot from is Kansas State, but we'll be rooting for them, or at least specifically Keontae Johnson. For those who don't know, he is the transfer from Florida who had a serious heart episode in 2020, collapsed on the floor, and he hasn't played an official game since. At the time when Keontae went down, we considered him a potential first-round pick. I was pretty convinced, that he was going to be a first-round pick. What kind of? I know he's played some in the last scrimmage. I think he played 17 minutes. What do you think are his chances of regaining his form?
Well, I had him as a projected starter going into the season. So I think. I know Jerome Tang has talked a little bit about how they want to bring him along, slowly. They don't want to pour 30 minutes on him to start a game or anything like that. But, I think he's going to start. I think, right now he's just shaking the rust off of nearly 2 years of not playing. They have so many new pieces, to that team because all but 2 players transferred away or graduated. The only 2 guys that are back are Marquise Noel and Ishmael Massoud. They both started in their exhibition game the other night. Jerome Tang's big task right now is to figure out how all the pieces fit together, whether or not he wants to redshirt one of his 2 freshmen, because he has the ability to do that. And he has a lot of veteran players that are going to get playing time. I think that Johnson fits in as a guy that'll start, probably sit for stretches to start the season until he gets his feet under them. And then I think we'll see in December how he really fits into the puzzle here. If he's 80% of the player he was at Florida, he's going to be an upgrade over pretty much anything Kansas State had last year.
Right. I'm hoping he even exceeds that and makes it back into the NBA conversation, just for his sake. But Maverick?
Yeah, Matthew, this is the last question. We just want to wrap it up with some predictions from you, okay?
Oh, okay.
So who do you think will win the Big 12? And what teams from the conference do you see making a long run in March Madness?
I've got Baylor winning the conference. I just think they've got as close to a complete team as anybody in the league right now. They're used to being in this situation now. It's not like 5-6 years ago when they were down a little bit and they were in the middle of the conference. They've built themselves into an elite program that is used to being at the top of the conference and really understands what it takes to get there. So I kind of feel like they're going to be my regular season champion. Big 12 tournament, I'm not going to pick anybody there because the tournaments are a complete crapshoot. As far as who can go the deepest, I think Baylor has a really good chance. I think that Texas Tech has a really good chance just because of the way they play defense. And I think by then AMAC will be back, and I think they'll have their rotation sorted out. And I actually think TCU has a really good chance to get to the second weekend this year. With all the talent they have, they really kind of play like Jamie Dixon's old Big East team. So they're used to being rough and tumble. They're used to low scoring games where they play really good defense and make some key shots. And I feel like those are the three teams right now that I think right now are built to get the most out of March Madness should they get there.
Okay. Mathew, thank you so much for joining us. And for folks who want to read your work, they can find on the Big 12, they can find it at Heartland College Sports. You also cover the Rangers in the summer for Fanside?
Fan Nation, which is part of Sports Illustrated. It's InsideRangers.com.
Okay. And anywhere else people can read you?
If you Google my name, all kinds of stuff will come up. Honestly.
Hopefully it's not like Josh Primo.
No, nothing like that. Nothing like that. I write for some other Fan Nation sites like Longhorn Country, Red Raider Review, Inside the Bears, All Aggie. Those sites, mostly Big 12 and SEC.
Okay. And people can follow you on Twitter at
Postins Postcard.
All righty. So make sure to do that. Mathew has obviously a ton of information and excellent writer, and we really appreciate it. Hopefully you'll come back maybe in between the season and March Madness, and maybe give us some more insight into the teams and how they're doing.
Absolutely. I'd be happy to come back anytime.
All right. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Mathew.
All right. So Mathew gave us a lot of stuff on the Big 12, so we won't necessarily have to dwell on those teams that we talked about in detail with him. But we'll start with the number one team in our poll, and that is the North Carolina Tar Heels. We've been talking the Tar Heels up pretty much ever since March Madness ended last year. Drew and I have, at least, saying that we like this team to be the best team in college basketball this year. And the reason mainly is the main piece that they lost was Brady Manick. And in coming in to replace him is Northwestern's Pete Nance, who's a similar style player, similar in size, similar in skill. I would think that Nance personally is a more gifted all-around player, probably a tad more athletic, definitely a better passer. I'm not knocking Brady. I think Brady has a nice game. The other thing, beside everybody, the key players coming back, they also added Seth Tremble, who's going to be the first guy off the bench for the Tar Heels. He was a top 40 recruit. And then we have Puff Johnson, who played on the team last year, who really started to come on as a reserve last year for them. He's a junior. He's the younger brother of Cam Johnson, who plays for the Phoenix Suns. And they also have another top 50 recruit in power forward, Jalen Washington. So and I could go on down the list. There's some other high recruits on this team that are either sophomore or freshmen that didn't get much playing time, like Dontrez Styles didn't play a lot last year. But there is some more potential on the bench. But they basically have a great starting five. They got Tremble as their sixth man. They have, or Puff Johnson, and now they have also Jalen Washington, to give them front court depth. So, what's not to like about this team, Drew?
No, this team has to be the favorite. They got to the tournament last year. They really started to gel. We saw down the stretch of conference tournament play, and then conference tournament play, and then into March Madness itself, the tournament. They got away to the finals and made a hell of a run at it. the reality of it is when you look at a team, especially in college basketball, something you want to see for those teams that really are a threat to go is veteran leadership, experience, with a nice bit of a boost from the young guys who can come in and give the veterans those breathers in earlier season play, and then hopefully come on and really make an impact when they need to. And I mean, you look at their guard rotation of Caleb Love, of Leaky Black, and of RJ Davis. There's probably not a more veteran guard rotation in the country, and the few that there are also on like contending teams. So one of their those three right there all shined in the tournament, had big games, whether it was in scoring, assists. I mean, they're the reason that they beat Duke. Some of the timely shot making that those three were accounted for. I mean, Baycott is on a very short list of guys who are going to probably contend for that National Player of the Year title. And you were literally talking about a guy that's going to get you 15 points and probably 15 rebounds a game.
Yep, and some block shots.
I mean, NBA fit, different conversation from when we switched to draft stuff, but we're talking college hoops, and that is the type of guy you want in the middle. And then I really like what we saw from Puff Johnson near the end there. I think, I know there's some injuries there. We got, he's dealing with something right now. I'm not 100% sure what he's banged up with.
Nobody is seriously injured on the target, but there are a couple of guys.
I couldn't find anything when I was looking that was like super scary. So I'm sure it might just be some wear and tear stuff. They had a deep run last year. They're just being cautious. If he can come on and take on that 6-man role, and then, Seth Trimble gives them a legitimate freshman, star power freshman, that if he kind of hits his potential, now they'd go 7 deep. And my favorite guy on this roster, just because I've covered him so much, for those who've been on the show, I love the addition of Pete Nance. This is no knock on Brady Manick. That guy had some huge games. I mean, he was killing Baylor before he got ejected. I think he averaged like 18, close to 20 points a game in the tournament. But Pete Nance is, in my opinion, just a better basketball player. He's got the NBA pedigree. That's great, but he's just as good of a shooter. He's a legit passer, people. I'm telling you, this guy is creative with the ball in his hands. He's comfortable with the ball in his hands, and he's 6'10", 6'11", and he gives them another this is one of the top transfers I don't think enough people talked about. That starting 5 is probably the best in the country, and then they have an additional 2 guys on the bench that we're pretty confident are going to be impact guys. And then, like Rich said, you've got some other players who didn't really get a chance to shine or are coming in as freshmen that if any of those guys pop, this is going to go 8 or 9 deep easily. And, until proven otherwise, they are the best team, in my opinion.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, this team is loaded with talent. The only small issue that I have is I'm going to say that there's not really any true shooters. And Pete Nance is going to fill that Brady Manick role of being a shooter. But Pete Nance shot 45% from 3 on only 3 attempts. Now, you could argue with the attention that other players are going to get on the Tar Heels, he's going to get more open looks, but his volume should increase. The only thing that I have an issue with is he's going to have to maintain that efficiency with increased volume on this team.
Yeah. I agree. But he definitely was the center of attention at Northwestern. He will not be the center of attention here. Love and Davis are, shot creators, playmakers off the dribble. And they're going to get most, and you can't afford to leave Baycott open because he's just
too big, too strong.
Yeah, he's just ultra efficient down low. But it would be nice if there was another guy could emerge, such as Seth Trimble, to knock down the threes. If that's the case, this team, if they have another 40% 3-point shooter, everybody else is in trouble. But that's a good point. I will say that Trimble, by the way, is, if for Tar Heel fans will remember JP I always screw up his name, but it's Tokoto. And if you remember JP, who I think played about 5 years ago, maybe a little longer for the Tar Heels, wasn't a big star in North Carolina, and he's currently playing in Europe, but he was an ultra athlete. And if he could have made a shot, he would have been a perfect 3-and-D type of defender because he had the athleticism to play in the NBA. So, all right. So, by the way, Tar Heels first big game. We have everybody's first interesting matchup coming up. They get a early easy schedule, and their first interesting game is November 30th against Indiana at Indiana. So that should be a good one. All right. So now we'll move on to Drew's boys, Gonzaga. And obviously they lost Chet Holmgren and Andrew Nebhard. Big losses, but this team is deep. And Drew, I'm not going to dwell a lot on them. I will. The only thing I guess what I'm worried about is replacing Chet Holmgren's rim protection. That's my biggest concern here. So what do you think?
I think this is a team that, look, I'm a Zags fan. I'll preface that. Anyone who's been on the show knows that Drew Timme is my guy. This team, to me, I can't definitively say that they're better. I mean, you lost Chet Holmgren, you lost Andrew Nembhard, both guys. One was a second pick in the draft, and another guy was drafted. But this team is a lot deeper. The big issue last year was you had your starting five and Anton Watson, and that was kind of it. I mean, you had the two freshman guards who'd come in a little bit, but they never got enough run throughout the year to really be effective when they needed to. You can't really blame that on them. I mean, asking a freshman to, hey, guess what? You got to go play against Arkansas in the Sweet 16, and I know you've only been playing like 10, 12 minutes a game. Not really fair. This team is deep. Might be the deepest team, in my opinion, depending on how those freshman guards develop. Look, Drew Timme doesn't need an introduction. He is a luxury in that in college basketball, I think the most important thing is having a guy that you can get the ball to, whether it's a guard, a big, it doesn't matter. And you go, we're probably getting a bucket on this possession. There's a good chance we score. That's what Drew Timme is. That's my pick for player of the year, which we'll get to. I'm also a big Julian Strawther fan. I think you want to talk about NBA type game. That's what he is. 3-and-D is his specialty. I actually wouldn't be surprised if they let him play some small ball 4 and really stretch the court and kind of do a 1-in, 4-out kind of situation with Strawther playing the 4. He's a good rebounder, crash to the glass. He averaged about 6 boards a game last year, and he shot close to 40% from 3. Unfortunately, he was awful in the tournament, so that is something to keep an eye on. 40% from 3 is great, but I don't care if you do it against Pepperdine. I need you to do it against UCLA and Duke and Kansas. Malachi Smith is a transfer that no one's talking about. In my opinion, he might have been the prize of the transfer portal. I mean, he came from Chattanooga, who also gave, if I'm not mistaken, the Fighting Illini a pretty good scare in the tournament. 20-point per game scorer. No one's going to replace Nembhard because he was arguably the best pure point guard in the country, one of them. And, Malachi Smith is not that, but he is a much more dynamic scorer and can give you perimeter offense, which I don't think the Zags had. A lot of it was Chet Holmgren and Timme, and then the guards were basically just shooting threes. Nolan Hickman and Hunter Salas, 2 5-star recruits, didn't get to play a lot last year. Everyone's talking them up. Hunter just had a 6-7 steal game in exhibition. I know Hickman's been talked about as a solid offensive threat. They're going to be in charge of a lot of the second unit and some tougher defensive assignments. So very important that they develop. And then I think, something that's a bit underrated is that Rasir Bolton came back, another good shooter.
Very good shooter.
I think he's a red shirt, or not a red shirt. I'm sorry. I think he's a 5th year, a super senior, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. And, you just look at that guard rotation. You're talking, whether it's a 1-2 combo guard situation, Malachi Smith, Nolan Hickman, Hunter Salas, Rasir Bolton. However you want to view, I mean, Strawther's more of a forward, small forward, but he can jump out and shoot on the perimeter. That's tough. And then the Efton Reed, who transferred from LSU. I don't know a lot about his game, but I do believe he's going to give the Zags some athletic pop down low, which they don't traditionally have. Gonzaga big men are generally very skilled, great on the block, can maybe step out and shoot the 3. I mean, you think about Sabonis, Timme, Olynyk, great players, but none of them had that athleticism that made them go, oh, that guy can defend the rim. That guy is a low down low. I'm not familiar enough with Efton to say that he's going to come in and become an enforcer and protect the rim. But if he does that, this is another one of those teams that is very clearly one of the top 4 or 5 teams in the country. On paper, can't deny it.
Right. Reed was a top 30 recruit.
Yep.
And he was brought in, to LSU as a rim protector, rim runner type of guy.
Mm-hmm.
He's on the slight side. At least he was last year. I haven't seen him this year. But certainly was well regarded. And to me, his development defensively, that's what he's going to, they don't need his offense. I mean, yes, it'd be nice to get some rolls and lobs to him, but What they really need him to do is protect the rim. So
6 or 8 points a game in rim protection, they'll be set. They need no offense from him. If he scores 2 points a game, they don't care. They have more than enough firepower.
And they don't even need a lot of rebounds for him because Watson and Timmy will grab them.
Yep. Love this team though. I know every year it seems like it's the year, but I just want to say for all those out there who heard the Big 12 move news, I do not want to hear how this team cannot compete in the power conferences. This team right now goes to the Big 12. They are the best team. And if you deny that, you are foolish. You do not know basketball. Look at this roster. Loaded.
Right. And their first big game, they will be in the first big game of the year. Yep. They will play on November 11th, just a few days from now, 7 days to be exact. They will play Michigan State in the Armed Forces Classic, which will be on a neutral court. So Michigan State isn't highly regarded. They're just outside the top 25, most people's opinions, but they still have a very, very solid team. So, and
you got Tom Izzo roaming the sidelines. That counts for something.
Right. So now we'll move on to Kentucky. And again, arguably probably has the most talent in the country. I would say this team has 2 top 15 freshmen coming in, and Cason Wallace, who I really, really like. We have him in top 10 on our draft board. Chris Livingston is a small forward, and he is also top 15 on our draft board. Wallace, to me, is the more developed player. He's a solidly built guard with a nice shot. I think Livingston, his shot is a little shaky. Of course, they have, the returning player of the year, the reigning player of the year, Oscar Tshiebwe. They have Damian Collins, who we interviewed recently, who was another top 15 recruit, didn't play much last year. By the way, our condolences to the Collins family. Damian's father passed away this week. They have Jacob Toppin, Obi's younger brother, at forward, can play small or power forward, and they have Severe Wheeler, who's an assist machine. One of the couple of interesting pieces are transfers. If Antonio Reeves, who averaged close to 20 points a game last year for Illinois State, I wouldn't be surprised if he starts for this team. And they have CJ Frederick, who didn't play he redshirted last year because of injuries. But if you remember with him, with Joe Wieskamp and Luca Garza, Frederick was just a knockdown shooting guard with a beautiful, beautiful stroke. In Kentucky, traditionally, that's one of their big problems. They can't ever hit the three.
Super talented, super athletic, cannot knock down a shot.
Right. And I would suspect CJ Frederick's going to be this year's version of Kellen Grady. And I will say Kellen Grady, he was, shot a nice percentage, but he really seemed to disappear in big games and for long stretches. So, And by the way, we didn't mention this at the top, but of course, this team, Grady and Ty Washington are the 2 key players that they lost from last year. So what do you make of this team, Maverick?
They just are raw with talent. I mean, the defensive potential is otherworldly. I mean, I'm going to drop a fact for y'all. Did y'all know that Oscar Tshiebwe is the first National Player of the Year to return since Tyler Hansbrough in 2009?
That's not good for his pro potential.
No, not. But for Kentucky, it's fantastic.
It's fantastic for Kentucky. Nothing wrong with being a Kentucky Wildcats legend. That means you're a damn good basketball player.
But yeah, I do have questions about the shooting as well. It's just gonna be determined on how well they mesh on offense and if they can reach their potential. Potential is not how they actually are; it's what they could be. So,
and that's the issue with them every year. You never know what you're going to get.
Every year, Calipari has the most talent, and every year the team comes up short, and every year the team starts slowly, and he's tinkering with lineups, pulling players in and out, and he tries to play everybody. Everybody gets 5 minutes here, 10 minutes there. and the team rarely ever seems to gel. Calipari, believe it or not, from what I've heard from people, insiders in Kentucky, his job might not be so safe as one might perceive. People are starting to turn on Calipari in Kentucky.
Recruiting does not matter if you cannot win.
Right.
But with that being said, the only thing I want to touch on, you guys pretty much covered it. We know what Oscar is, and they've got, as always, they're loaded. My favorite high school player, and I scouted him for his 2021 season, is Caston Wallet. This guy is awesome. I watched him play in Texas in a what was it, like the TABC showcase. It's like this big kind of preseason showcase for all these Texas schools. And I watched him go head to head against Keontae George, who was the number one recruit in his class, who is at Baylor, if I'm not mistaken.
That is correct.
And then Arterio Morris, who is at Texas, if I'm not mistaken. Yep. He was a 4-star. And his teammate Rylan Griffin's at Alabama. So I watched 4 really highly touted recruits, 2-on-2, going at it. And this kid just impressed the hell out of me. He was the best player on the court. Great body, knows how to play, didn't hijack his offense, and still scored like 22 points. Had no problem guarding the other 2 guards who were ranked ahead of him in the state and the national rankings. Just clearly knows how to play the game. I also watched him at Peach Jam, which is the big Nike showcase that they do. Again, just looked very sharp. Really big fan of this kid. The only weakness I saw, and I really don't think it's a weakness, it's just in the games that I scouted, his 3-ball didn't really knock it down. He was, I think the first game I watched, he was like 1 for 4. And then the other game, I think he was like 0 for 3 or something. But he went to the free throw line. It was money, pull up mid-range game. This kid's an absolute baller. I love him. If he ever hears it, Wallace, big fan of yours, man. It was a joy watching you play in high school. I am very excited to see what you do at this next level. I think he's better than Ty Washington coming in. Oh yeah, and we saw Ty get drafted. So best to this kid, man. This Calipari got a good one. This guy can play.
Yeah, and he's and he's solidly built, so he doesn't. Have,
he's like 6'4", 190, I think.
Yeah, well, I think he might even be a little bigger than that, but he's got muscle on him. Their first big game, by the way, is also against Michigan State, and that will be on November 15th at the State Farm Champion Classic that we see every year, involving Kentucky, Kansas, Duke, and Michigan State. So that will be Kentucky's first big game.